relates with your work in geographic names and place names.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Welcome,
And from
Tim.
the Department of Libraries, in addition to myself and Jesse, the executive assistant for the department, we also have some members of our team here. Josh Muse is here. He's our technology consultant. April Shaw is here. And let's see, Jeanette Schaefer's here. And I believe that Tom McMurdo's in a meeting, but will be joining later.
Later. Okay. Very good. Now,
Did I
are there
miss anybody?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, Kathy. Okay. No one speaking up. So, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Tom, are we going to talk about vacancies that have to be filled? I can't recall.
Yeah, we had a little bit at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
We did have scheduled for the end of the meeting to make sure we cover that topic, and keep reminding us, Maxie. Yeah. Okay. Now, are there any members of the public here that wish to speak?
Well, I'm a member of the public. I'll introduce myself again. Lynn Shea. I'm from Townsend, Vermont. Been involved in the past year in working on renaming Negro Brook. So I'm here to just not participate, to observe your discussion of your policies as we have been ready to go. So I just want to stay informed.
Well, welcome. We are excited that you are with us. This is good because you know the history on that. So the fact that you are here and concerned about the policies, very appreciative of that. Okay, now we need to approve the agenda for the minutes. I should say, is there anybody else from the public? Shay. So now let's go to the minutes. We have the minutes from the January and April minutes. The one from the January had not been approved because the board members had not gotten the copies in time. And really thank Jesse for getting the minutes and all of that information out to us in a timely manner. So any additions or correct? Let's go with the January minutes first. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes that we received, and then we'll discuss them?
I'll move to approve the minutes from that meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Wait, so we're not discussing the minutes for corrections?
We will once we get their motion to approve and then seconded, and then we'll discuss. This get it on the table. And okay, so it's been seconded, moved to approve the minutes. Now let's any discussion, additions, corrections?
One possible addition was the mention of the nominations. It seems like the minutes are recording the official actions, and it says after discussion, comma, maybe it would be after discussion about other names to clarify that for example, my name was brought up as a possibility, which I would have to go back to the recording to see exactly how I worded things, but I was unable to do that because of capacity. But it's maybe just discussion about other names would solve that. That would be one recommendation to accurately reflect what happened.
Because that's what you said. We are, okay. So that was, you said there was a discussion, and what you want to say is that we need to, in the meeting, not just there was a discussion, but just a little bit about what actually was discussed.
Can I ask which minutes we're talking about?
The January
or the January? Okay, thank you.
Should be on the January. Also, are the meetings now posted to the web? Not the minutes, but the actual recording?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
And Josh might know that, or you, Kathy. if
Yeah,
they're-
I'm looking now. I'm looking now, and the recording of the January 11th, 2022 meeting is up online. And
Okay.
so is the recording of the April 12th, 2022 meeting.
Okay, so for minutes, I always like to say they're supposed to be minutes, not hours. So the minutes are basically recording the major actions that were taken. And it might be good to just to refresh people, just a short description of a discussion, even though no action was taken. Would that be the consensus of the board?
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure what, Adrian, could you just identify where you're talking about?
Yes, I can. So I'm going to be looking on my phone here for the correct paragraph. But
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it is on the bottom of the first page, and it says, after discussion about Linda made a motion to nominate Tom Frank as the chair, that part. Well, I'm saying after discussion about possible names. It wasn't
I see.
like just to refer that there was discussion of other possibilities.
And
doesn't
by
have to
names,
be-
you mean candidates, right? After discussion about other candidates?
Yes.
Okay.
For it can be still generally speaking.
Yeah, sure.
Just to be a
So-
little bit more clear, because it wasn't discussion only on Tom Frank and Maxie. There was more to it. I would have to go back to the recording now that I know it's on the website to look at the precise language that was used to accurately describe it. But something like after discussion about other possible names, comma, blah, 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 keep everything else the same. Because the rest of it is recording the official actions. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes it clear to me. I just think the word we don't need to be micromanaging this. It just seems like candidates is a better term than names because we're talking about other candidates, right?
Candidates for the position.
Yeah, candidates for the position.
Right.
So after discussion of other candidates, Linda Sarnioki made a motion, da, 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 da.
Yes, exactly.
Blah, blah,
That
Okay.
would be more accurately reflecting what happened.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's
but
fine
we
with me.
we are trying to do total transparency, and that's why the actual recording is now being posted to the web. So if anybody wants to know specifically exactly what was said, they can go there and get the whole thing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Any additions? I'm sure Mr. Post left some He has said he was going to mail some edits, didn't he, Kathy or Jesse?
I don't believe I saw any.
Oh, okay. He's
Jesse,
very
did
good
you
on.
see any?
I did not. He did not send any to me.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's because he's usually the comma and quotations and all that. So, okay. Are there any other additions or corrections to the January? It was 11th, right? Meeting. If not, we'll approve. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Abstentions. Okay, now we'll go to the April board meeting and see if motion to approve.
So moved. Linda?
Okay. Second. Okay, now discussion, additions, corrections. None? Anybody? I didn't see any. I thought it was a good representation of what happened. And once again, the whole recording is on the website. So hearing no additions or corrections, all in favor of approving the minutes from the April meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Anybody that wasn't at that meeting? I think everybody was there. Okay, and since it's hard for me to stay on Teams, okay, somebody raised their hand.
This is Kathy. I wanted to mention something during the housekeeping topic, if I may, related
Sure.
to emails. Okay,
Ah,
I wanted
okay,
to
that-
just,
Yeah,
yeah, I think this fits into housekeeping because it's part of how we communicate when the minutes are up and how we communicate as a board around agendas. And for those of you who, all of you, I'm sure, reviewed the April 12th minutes, you'll recall that we had some conversation about emails for the Board of Libraries. Right now, the practice has been just that the Board of Libraries members are using their personal emails. I did confirm with colleagues in ADS that the best practice is really to have a separate email for board business only. And so we have gone ahead and set up emails for each of the board members. And the naming convention is first name dot last name at partner.vermont.gov. And so that would be tom.frank at partner.vermont.gov. I'm really getting my enunciation in this morning. So what we will
partners,
do.
was that?
Partner,
what was-
singular, partner@vermont.gov. So it's a state email address for a partner group because this is a partner board, really. And that's how the other boards' emails are set up.
Okay,
Um,
partners, okay.
At partner.vermont.gov. And so the next step is going to be that Jesse will reach out to board members to share some information with you about how to access the emails. They have been made already, so you'll need to get into the emails, and Jesse can provide support to you one-on-one, even as far as, if somebody needs to come into the office here, we could potentially help you on site to get access to that email. And the idea here is that this is helping us to comply even more thoroughly with open meeting law. If there's a records request related to the Board of Libraries, these emails, the data is accessible to ADS and we can do the data scraping rather than you having to think back, what day did I send an email? Who did I send it to? So it's just a way for us to be more compliant with that and to keep the business of the Board of Libraries distinct from your personal emails.
That
And
sounds
also,
great. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and as also an update on that, if you notice, if you get an email from Jason Broughton from the National Library Service, Library of Congress, it's to you individually and it doesn't say and 6 more. And because Kathy brought that up and I talked to Jason about it. So he is BCCing everybody. So because if we got a message from him before and hit reply all, we now have a meeting because it's more than 3 of us meeting to discuss anything. So Jason understood that. So he's BCCing us. So nobody else shows on. So when you reply to Jason, you're just replying to Jason and not anybody else.
In terms of expectations and norms around checking this email, I know I have an unusual situation where I work at a public library Tuesday through Saturday, so I'm not checking my emails per se between Saturday and Tuesday. But if there are messages coming in on the night before a meeting, like what are the expectations? Is it check once a day? Is it check a couple times a week? Is it just weekdays? Is it when the Department of Libraries works, or like when to, because this will be my 5th email. And so I want to know how to manage that. What I should expect communications from the board. Some may be unexpected, but some may be more of a routine that I can tap into.
That's a really good question, Adrian. Thank you.
And I would assume, and Josh, you could say you could probably forward a copy to your own email if it's if you forget to go in and check it. And then, and then
can I jump in on that for a
get it.
second?
Oh yes, please.
So you can individually forward messages from your from the state account to your personal account, but you cannot set it to automatically forward because it views your account as a non-secure, an external account as a non-secure location, and so it just basically won't let you do that, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, but if it's non-secure and we could be talking about confidential information as well, so it's good.
James has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm also in a situation where I have about 5 email addresses, and a couple of them have made it even more complicated getting into the emails, where you have to contact technical help in order to get what they're calling dual authentication. So there's this process now where you have to go through for a couple of them to get to do that. And then I'm sort of wondering, how often would we be expected to check emails if you do have about 5 to check, and they're becoming more and more complicated in terms of being able to get into them to check?
Excuse me.
Good question. Okay.
Can I, this is Kathy, just to share. We don't typically, well, as members of the board, really what we're using our email for primarily is to discuss agenda building, because of course we're not having any conversation of the board in the emails. So I think that typically the goal that we have is to be doing agenda building about 2 weeks in advance of the meeting. And as far as communications coming from the Department of Libraries, I think that those would come to you Monday through Friday, between the hours of 7:45 and 4:30, typically. There have been a couple of times recently when we were a little bit, we're trying to get into the new pattern, all of us, about agenda building and when to do that. And I'm not sure that there was I think there was a full week between when we posted the minutes and the agenda for this meeting online. Typically what we are doing is posting the agenda and notifying you that it has been posted. So it's actually available online first, and then we're notifying you about that right away after it's posted. It's really a matter of the agenda building. So I think, Tom, perhaps you might have some recommendations about, as the chair, when you want folks to contact you around agenda building and what the cutoff for the agenda would be, so we can get it posted at least a week in advance.
And let's see, because probably two weeks prior to our quarterly board meetings. So that wouldn't be too burdensome, because we only meet officially 4 times a week unless we have a special meeting. 4 times a year, I mean, not a week. So Kathy, because I know you and I talk and try to figure out what we're going to do with the agenda, and I talk to other folks, can talk to individually, what you would like, and that's quite permissible with the open meeting law. You can talk about agenda building and all of that.
Yeah. And just as for information, I'm looking at the Guide to Open Meetings from the Secretary of State's office, the document. And on page 6, it says that the requirements for the meeting agenda is that it be posted at least 48 hours. So we might strive for more than that, but the open meeting requirement is simply a 48-hour prior posting. I think we're trying to get it up a week in advance to give people some notice and some information.
Right,
so they know to come.
Yeah, they remind people to come, and whatever what the link is, Tom, to get in and that information. Yeah, so, but I would just say like 2 weeks prior to it, if you have specific things you want to discuss, that's when they should be sent out, Kathy, me, what you would like to see on the agenda. So then we can get that finalized. Kathy can send it out a week in advance to everybody, and then officially posted 48 hours before the meeting. That would deal with all the requirements.
Tom, there are two hands up right now, and
Okay.
Maxie's got her hand up, and then James, and I don't know which of you was first, so I'll leave it to the two of you. Whoever was first with your hand, maybe.
Yes, go ahead.
Go first because James called. So Maxie.
Whatever, it's just, so phone calls in between are allowed? I mean,
You
I
can
can-
speak with, you could call Tom on the phone. One member can call another member on the phone. If there are gatherings of more than 3 of you or phone calls or emails of more than 3 of you, then that is problematic.
yeah,
But you
okay.
can all feel free to contact me, and you can also feel free to contact Tom. We've been looping in Jesse as well. So Adrian, if you wanted to send an email and say, have there been any things about that? You know, if you just want to be sure, you could send us an email.
Wait, so you mean like if
I
there
would-
was like an article and I wanted to, about libraries and I wanted to share it with the board, I need to go to you, Kathy, or to Jesse? Or not at all?
I think you want to be careful not to be discussing anything about libraries as a group. So if you wanted to send something to the board like that, if you wanted it to be on an agenda, you would probably, you could say, I want to discuss this article, but no discussion should happen. And you don't have to go through us for that. I was suggesting if you wanted to ping us, Adrian, and check or give a quick call, has there been any discussion about agenda stuff? Should I check my email? We're here, but I think really if you check your email once a week, it's probably sufficient.
Okay. Yeah, so then maybe my question about double authentication, and one solution was there are ways to generate codes so you don't have to have text messages going to your personal phone to have to be able to log in. There are other strategies if needed to be checked more, but once a week throughout the whole year.
Yes.
Okay.
But
especially particularly maybe 2 weeks before a meeting or a week before the meeting or the days before the meeting.
Yeah, where it's problematic, let's say we get some information on naming a brook or a bridge in Townsend. That's okay. That's the information, but you don't want to get a group together and say, what do you mail that out to? Like you say, what do you think of this to the whole group? Because that's a meeting. And you can, but in the agenda item, we can bring it up. These are the documents that we're going to use to be discussed in the meeting. It's just we can't, as a group, 3 or more than 3, because that's a quorum. It's a violation of the open meeting law. Okay, we got 2 hands raised.
I have my hand up, I think. I have 2 questions. One is various members of the board periodically send around interesting articles. Debbie sent that article last week about books being, I've forgotten the word. Anyway, books in libraries and people objecting to books in libraries. And people commented on that. Does that become a meeting? Should we just be saying thanks for the article as opposed to, oh yes, I agree with that, and in our library we are blah blah blah? That's my first question. The second question is, and this is just a recommendation, we may be sending, the standard may be to send agenda 48 hours in advance, but at least 48 hours in advance. But if we're sending voluminous pages regarding geographic naming, I really need that more than 48 hours in advance.
No, that's why I'm saying she's going to send up at least a week in advance. Yep. And I was saying hopefully more closer to 2 weeks in advance for those types of items.
Yeah.
And the answer to your question is yes, it is a meeting because that is a topic that may come up in front of the board. And Kathy, wouldn't the safest way, if you have any questions about it, a library in Mississippi, banning books, that was one that was coming around. Others, especially in Vermont, have any questions, either best thing
Yeah.
I think would be to send it to Kathy. And then if Kathy thinks it's information that the board needs, can send it out and make that determination.
So one resource I just put in the chat thread, the link to this document that I'm holding, for those of you who can see me on camera, a guide to open meetings. The information that Tom is sharing is really covered on page 10. And it says that group emails do not necessarily violate the open meeting law, but it is best to proceed with caution. It's permissible to use a group email to schedule a meeting, to create an agenda, or to distribute information for discussion at a meeting. So Adrian, your article, if it's something you'd like to discuss, this seems like an important issue. Here's this article. I'd like this to be on the agenda. And that's the end of discussion. If I then say, yeah, I agree with the author, but that suddenly has become a meeting if all of us are in the email thread. It says here, group email should not be used by a quorum of a public body to discuss the body's business. So these library-related topics. If a quorum of board members are part of the group email and any dialogue occurs addressing business matters, this discussion is a meeting under the statute that then is listed, and the open meeting law's notice and public participation requirements are triggered. Essentially, this is kind of the key. Essentially, a business discussion and therefore a quote meeting can occur as soon as you hit reply all. So Linda, if you replied to Adrian directly, not reply all, and then Maxie replied to Adrian directly, not reply all, and that's sort of what's going on with Jason's emails, because I understand and sometimes I receive them from him as well, that he just is keeping in touch and sharing things that might be of interest to folks as a friend, but and as a former colleague. But there's the fear is that we could end up, hang on, I'm letting Deb back in. We could end up accidentally replying all. And so that's why Jason is now doing the sending as a BCC. A blind carbon copy.
Well, I don't want to open this up as a forum on the open meeting law, but I think that's really unfortunate because it stifles conversation.
And
okay.
I'm sorry, I have a very quick comment. I love Adrian's communications. I find them enlightening, and whether we consider it further, I don't, obviously we shouldn't, but I really appreciate everything that I get from Adrian.
For those who cannot see Adrian's video, she's got her hand over her heart in a thank you gesture. I'd like to recommend, Adrian, if you send something like that, that you do it just like Jason is as a blind carbon copy. You're sending it to people. It's a blind carbon copy. Nobody's going to respond back to everyone accidentally. I think that if you're just sending this as a news article, just FYI to keep your colleagues informed, no big deal. But also, I'm happy to send them and say, this is just a news article, and I'm happy to put them, this is from Adrian. I mean, however we want to work it out. I don't want to steal your voice, Adrian.
No, I really appreciate that. I read every single one of those articles that Adrian sends out, but it's just the issue of it's best don't hit reply all. It was the same with the federal government and with Social Security when I was there. So you hit that, it starts to violate because we then have a quorum. And you can say we would, oh, I never discussed that, just in the open meeting when it was open to everybody. So, okay, we do need to move on here. But once again, you can, it's not a formal business, but you can talk to Kathy, and is the open meeting law is posted on our website, is it not?
I'm not sure if it is.
Or
But
you put a link, I think you put a, where it's quoted, I think
yeah,
you said you put a link to
I did. I put a
that
link in
document.
I put a link in our meeting chat, and then I will also send the link. Jesse or I will send the link out to each of you at your personal and your Board of Libraries emails, just in case it takes a little bit of time for you to get through to it. But it's posted on the Secretary of State's website. It's a great resource that they have for everyone. And the intent of it is not to stifle discussion, but to make sure the public can be part of the discussion and observe the discussion and hear the discussion.
And even when the open meeting came out, when I was trustee on the Milton Public Library, Milton gave us each our own email that had to go through Milton, and there was a disclaimer in it. Everything here is open to the public. Remember, everything here on this website, or all of these emails are open to the public. So that's even if you are a trustee of a local library, it applies to an open meeting law as well. Okay, anyway, let's go on to the next thing. And I believe, since I can't see both of them at the same time, Tim, I think you're up to talk about.
Oh, we forgot.
Oh, who did we forget?
Our friend here who I observed. Huh. Okay, never mind.
Oh. Okay. Am I missing something on the agenda there, Jesse or Kathy? Because we're going to the.
I think we're moving to item 5, the presentation by Tim Turway from Vermont Center for Geographic Information.
Okay, Mr. Turway, and the first thing I asked you, did you used to have the office on the little corner house in Waterbury? Was that the Geographic office? Probably got flooded out around.
No, VCGI once was, it originated as a state entity. It then was a nonprofit for a while, and that was the time period when it was in Waterbury. And then in 2015, it was reconsumed as part of the state of Vermont again.
Ah, okay.
But as like many of you all, our office, most of the time, at least 4 days of the week, are our home offices rather than the National Life complexes where we go for our weekly meetings once a week. Our physical location, that is.
So you're on, and if you could bring us up to date on the geographic naming as far as you're concerned, because you are our liaison with Washington.
1 second. Bear with me while I share this in Teams. It should be loading. So I assume you can hear me all, is that correct?
I can.
Coming through loud and clear. Okay, great. How about, do you see a cover slide currently that says Vermont's GIS and geographic names and overview?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, well, good morning all. Thanks for having me. My purpose for being here today is to provide an overview of how decisions that you make as the Board of Libraries, on behalf of the state of Vermont, ultimately make it to geographic data that we provide as the official state spatial data or spatial open or public data stewards. I'm a geographer by training, and so are my colleagues, and by proxy, we function as spatial data librarians. And what that means has evolved over time, but more or less it means that we have to ultimately reflect what you all have agreed upon as the approved set of names for features and places across the state of Vermont. At a high level, we are not only stewards of providing this as open access to spatial data layers, but we also build some of them as well. Some of the more technical things, such as we run the statewide ortho imagery program that flies airplanes around the state every year and captures portions of the state with high resolution aerial photography. We build what it's called high resolution LiDAR elevation data sets, which is literally shooting lasers at the surface of the earth and returning highly detailed information about cover. And we also, I think perhaps most importantly, our function is we coordinate all of the different spatial data producing and using entities across the state, whether that's the Agency of Natural Resources, the State Archives and Records Administration, VTrans, the Agency of Human Services, all down the line. We basically are bridge builders across all of them. So when I met with Catherine a few weeks back, figured it'd be good for us to talk with you all about how what we do ultimately reflects what you do. That being said, if I move through my slides here, just to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing, you see a slide that says elevation imagery and parcel boundaries on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. There's a little asterisk up there. It says what VCGI does, and at the bottom it says a sample also what VCGI does not do, and that is name features. You perhaps wouldn't be surprised that we get contacted semi-often asking us about, names of features of lake ponds, populated places, so on and so forth. We have to remind folks who inquire to us that that is not something that we do. We make this information available and map layers as well as applications, but we do not name those features. And so further tightening the official or formal documentation of what VCGI does in relation to what the Board of Libraries does is within our interest, so that we can mutually benefit from how the whole process works in Vermont. And these are just examples, as I mentioned before, of some of the major information products that we make available freely. Now, one of the things we often get asked, mostly by legislatures, aren't you all done mapping yet? Hasn't the whole state been mapped? And the answer is, of course not, because information, as you well know, changes, right? You can see this left-handed image there, an old analog digital relief where you can touch it and you feel, the Green Mountains, the presidential range, whereas, what we do is all digital information on the right-hand side. But the whole point of it is that this information is always and forever changing, and therefore, no, we're not done mapping yet, and that includes names. That being said, our founding started in 1983, in part with many of the academic institutions in the state of Vermont, putting forth the Geographic Information System for Vermont, or GIS in short. This whole thing changes with technology. So in 1992, we used to have to mail 17 floppy disks to our inquirers about, sending this information around, and that's how we distributed spatial map layers. That's all changed, whereas now today we are serving over 17 terabytes of spatial information, and we don't do it by mailing or even downloading data primarily, albeit that we still provide. Most of what we do is served in what are called web map services. So think of those as effectively like Netflix for map information, whereas anyone with a streaming internet connection can hook up with the latest, greatest real-time data that's provided in a maps service. So that's the recommended way for accessing information, because in part it always is intended to reflect the latest, greatest available information that is out there and published. And again, we coordinate not just with state entities, but also all the way down to Vermont municipal governments. As you know, there are over 250 of them. Regional planning commissions, which are quasi-governmental organizations that effectively function as counties in the state of Vermont, but also do GIS work, state agencies. And then we curate what's called the Vermont Open Geodata Portal, which is essentially a website that all members of the public can access individual layers, of which there are over 1,000 of them, to freely use in map production and planning projects. Our data is also federated up to the federal level via data.gov, who harvests our information, not just that we curate, but other state entities all down the line provide and maintain. So it's a surprisingly uniform and coordinated system, at least in terms of governmental interaction being working together. Because if we don't do it, it doesn't work. Not only do things change with technology, they change in space. So depending on what zoom scale or which level you're looking at mapped information, what you're looking at is displayed differently. Otherwise, it would not be legible. So information changes in space, and most perhaps relevant to our discussion with the Board of Libraries, things change with preferences, evolving preferences and norms. Perhaps most obviously is some of Vermont's historical municipality names have changed. Here you have the example of what is now known as the town of Jay, used to be Carthage, or the town of Sutton used to be Billymead, as two examples. You know, these things evolve, and we want to make sure that we reflect how evolving preferences and norms for features in the Vermont landscape are reflective of what the current status is. So this is an example here of something that's very common in geography and GIS and cartography currently. This is what we call a base map. This is provided by perhaps one of the world's largest private map producing entities, and they are Esri. They're based out of California. Most government and private entities have contracts, including us, with Esri that offer map services, including base map services. You can see here you've got Vermont's counties as well as adjoining states and Canada, for instance. Those are all tied up with the official name source, which again is the GNIS, or Geographic Name Information System, that's curated by the federal government, of which we both push and pull information from respectively. So base maps, you know, they should be naming your major features like administrative boundaries, water bodies, so on and so forth at various scales. On top of base maps, we provide, again, not just us, but other state GIS producing and using departments pull a layer, produce a layer of just Vermont specific information coming from GNIS. So for example, from VT Data Geographic Names is a product that we curate at least on an annual basis that currently has over 11,000 named points in the state. Again, these reflect official names in the state of Vermont as they are published up in GNIS. You can see once you begin to zoom into a place like Barry City, for example, here you see everything from schools to cemeteries to things that are under your purview for setting standards of approved names to features in the landscape. The schema or the table, let's say the official uniform values or accepted values within this spatial information are, for example, as follows on this slide. You can see within the GNIS data layer, which is reflected in that Vermont geographic names layer that I just provided. For example, under the GN type field, it's got 52 accepted values there, everything from airports, areas, bar, basin, so on and so forth. So again, knowing that the Board of Libraries does not set names for either addresses or transportation related entities, but rather all the rest of these do reflect ultimately your work. So just making sure that that is clear. Here's a snapshot of what the Open Geodata portal looks like. And for example, on the geographic names data set, you can see on the left-hand side, this is what a member of the public would see when they come and access this information. They can view it either on a map or download it for use or connect with those web services that I mentioned previously. And all layers provided there are have affiliated or associated metadata, data about data of its maintenance, its changes over time, who's responsible, what the authoritative sources are for said data. So for example, with the GeoName data set, it says how we reflect the official federal GNIS data layer, spatially enable that for the state of Vermont and provide a Vermont extract at least on an annual basis. So if there's an official name change that you all make that ultimately gets slurped up by GNIS, we grab it from GNIS, make that portable in a spatial data set and publish that via the portal for all users to see. Again, not only do we do this, but Esri does this for their maps. It's highly likely that major other public digital map providers such as the Googles and Apples of the world also do the same. So they're pulling from this same composite of federal named places standards. We also participate, for example, in something called the Esri Community Maps Program, which is the process by which we submit the spatial components of the named entities. For example, if the shape of a town changes, we submit that up through the Esri Community Base Maps Program so that it's aggregated for users all across the world. Building footprints is another thing that change regularly. New buildings pop up, buildings go away. Those are submitted at a 6-month clip. We also stand up and support applications that members of the public can use. For example, the Vermont Interactive Map Viewer on your screen currently. You can see that has some certain name features, like there's hills and mountain peaks there that are stylized within this view. And I just want to use this to reiterate the point that whether you're seeing an application such as the Vermont Interactive Map Viewer on your screen now, or something like the Vermont Emergency 911 viewer here, it's displaying visually information in a different way, but it's pulling the same data source. And this is what I want to reiterate, that the way that we do things is that these kinds of tools and applications are ultimately behind the scenes reflecting the same source data, such that if you change the source data, which is reflecting hopefully the authoritative source, even if people have developed and maintained applications such as these two examples in a different way by toggling things off and on or symbolizing their information in a different way, they ultimately are reading the same parent source information such that it's consistent throughout. It's just a matter of cartographic decision and ultimate use cases that means that they're displaying it differently. It's not different data, it's displayed differently per the ultimate use case that it supports. Relatedly, we do set forth GIS data standards and policies for all GIS users in Vermont, and the one that's particularly related with what you all do is what's called the Vermont Geographic Area Names and Code Standard. Again, this is not about naming features, but rather once you have named features, making a uniform way for using them in a digital domain. Again, because digital data works with databases, if you've got one misplaced character, it breaks the entire data set and it doesn't, the data doesn't work well enough. So this establishes the alphanumeric codes such that this information all works as expected in the digital domain and environment. For example, you can see there on that right inset image, there's a nested hierarchy in relation with census geographies of a numeric code that goes with associated towns, counties, towns, and villages within them that are coordinated with federal naming standards, federal what are called GeoIDs, such that you can use them to join to other spatial and non-spatial information reliably. And as well as stable in time. So it's much better than getting, 14 different spellings of Alberg with an H or without an H, so on and so forth. You can see here, this is another example of the data tables we provide associated with the geographic area code standard lookup tables that we call them. And you can see here the genus name is reflected there as a field. So I mentioned Alberg because it's one that some folks in the past have added an H or no H. It's one place or a one-stop shop that you can get so that all this data is interoperable and portable across uses. When we do make changes to our standards and guidelines and policy documents, you can see an example here on our vcgi.vermont.gov website. For example, currently we're undergoing an update to that very geographic names and code standard where we have accommodated the recent inclusion or incorporation of the city of Essex Junction as an entity, formerly village, now a city. So we had to change the naming standard to reflect that, among a number of other things. But this is basically where we go and post updates to these for public comment. We also send those out when they are made and available through something called the VGSL listserv, which we are statutorily required to do, as well as more informal outlets like Twitter and our news section on vcgi.vermont.gov. So this is where to sort of stay in the loop about some of these policies as they change with time. And again, this is just an example of how this all, the rubber meets the road with the the table data, the non-spatialized data and the names within, the values within, and then the spatial representation of those information layers. For example, you're looking at a map now that's reflecting Essex Junction as of last Friday as an official city in the state of Vermont. However, it's not all fun and games because when you start looking at things like boundaries spatially, you might have the name consistent, but the boundaries are not. So here's an example of the 2022 approved house districts in the state of Vermont that are not consistent, unfortunately, with the village, formerly village, now city districts of the city of Essex Junction. And so all of these parts are a perpetual challenge to make work together. But it's just an example of how this works in practice. So where I want to leave you all with this today is where I started, which is ideally we would like to formally strengthen our relationship as the GIS stewards throughout the state with how we reflect what you all do in adopting and considering names and names changes for features throughout Vermont. In your current, I think most recently updated geographic name policy document there, I think it was most recently updated in 2015. There's nothing that stipulates how we relate with what you all do. So Catherine and her team and I were discussing a few weeks back, potentially having an addition to this document that states that. So something akin to, all approved name changes that you provide ultimately make their way to genus, and from genus, VCGI incorporates these approved name changes in their respective spatial data layers and applications once they are approved and available. Obviously, this is just draft, but it's for your consideration, both in principle as well as in detail what that would actually say. But we're happy to work with you all on what that could look like. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there and open it up for you all for questions or comments. But look forward to hopefully having something like this added to your names, policies, and practices. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any hands? Well, I'll have one question. So basically, we do the name, but with a policy, we'll look at that, and then we send it to the feds. They update their database, and you pull that down from the federal,
Absolutely.
Which is the unified database.
That's exactly right. That's it. Yep.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Question. Thank you, Tim. This was a fascinating presentation. I really enjoyed it. So who funds your organization? I wasn't quite clear.
We are part of the state of Vermont. We are publicly funded.
Okay, great.
We're part of what's called the Agency of Digital Services. When I get into the whole breakdown of agencies and divisions in the state of Vermont, but we are essentially a laterally functioning institution. It's weird for state government in that we're not necessarily siloed. We have to be horizontal and working across all agencies, but we fit within the matrix of Agency of Digital Services.
Oh, come to the city or the town of Charlotte. We could use you.
So trust me, if I can only clone 7 of my cells, we might be able to remotely deal with the amount of questions we get. But I can only guess why you say such a thing. Yes, working with towns is one of our perennial challenges. There's so much to do. It's infinitely open-ended. Yeah, I see. Catherine, you have your hand up too.
I do. I also just really appreciate that you came and shared. And since you had provided me with an overview in the past, I've been poking around a little bit on the web while you were talking. I did put the link to the geographic area code standards into the chat thread, and Jesse will put that into the minutes of the meeting because you might wish to look at it. And I know that a lot of you, if you don't work for the state, you don't have access to the chat after the meeting. So we'll get anything that we've put into the chat thread, those links will go into the minutes. I do have kind of something that maybe I'm just geeking out now, Tim, but I was noticing that you have these different layers that you can kind of look through, and there's one that has utilities and facilities, and it lists all of the schools. And I'm wondering, could we potentially work with you to have the geographic data for all of the public libraries on one big cool map?
Yeah, we do
that
actually
people could get to through the.
Yes,
Sorry.
Long story short, yes, we do have currently a point layer of libraries in the state of Vermont, but it's probably not up to date. So
yeah, it looks like it was. I found Josh Muse actually pointed me toward a map that was created in 2014 and then updated in 2020. So it's probably pretty up to date, but then it wasn't listed as one of the utilities and facilities. I didn't see it there. So I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, I can share a link where it lives on the portal in a second.
Yeah, because it would be great to have the name of the libraries and, I think right now it's showing things like town name Westford, but it doesn't show like the name of sometimes the library has a different name than the town. For example, like St. Johnsbury with the Athenaeum.
So I just posted where the library's data set lives in the portal.
Okay.
And it looks like there's 182 records. And yes, the schema does have everything like primary address, the type of site, town name. It also has coordinates for the point at least associated with it, as well as a web URL. So that would be the item worth updating, etc.
Okay.
But long story short, the portal is, it's a mess. Categorizing things is a long going thing, but we keep getting more and more things and categorizing yeah. So things, you may not find them. Your best approach to finding things based on how you think they might be organized and classified is to try a different search function until we get some more improvements made with how data are presented and classified there. But ultimately, there's more there than is clearly presented. Yes, we are aware.
And we could
any other
maybe
questions? Yeah.
work
I'm
with.
sorry.
I was just suggesting that would be something we could do with the Department of Libraries to work with you to incorporate the library name, for example, as a field, and we could provide the data and over time get that updated.
That'd be wonderful. So yes,
Great.
Be in touch afterwards and we can work towards that.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Tim, you said that you would like our policies and procedures document to include more information or more direct information about how we might partner with you or how you inform our work as a geographic naming body. And so, Kathy, I wonder if the draft that you sent of changes to that document includes what Tim is recommending.
It includes at least some of it, and I wonder if it could include more, but I think if you look, and we'll go through this in the next agenda topic, but the order announcing, we do list Vermont Center for Geographic Information as who we send the announcement to, which is letting them know that it has happened. As far as the context, or not the context, but the naming convention, I don't know that the revisions right now say anything about the naming conventions, but certainly the board could consider that in the next agenda item to add that type of language about the naming conventions.
I'm impressed by how much information you provide, Tim. I had no idea that all of that was available. It's astonishing. So thank you.
And all I know is somebody there discovered that Mount Mansfield was not 4,393 feet. I think it's 4,397 feet or something like that. Must have been your LiDAR.
That's a complicated subject. I'll spare us. Yeah.
So anyway, we thank you very, very, very much and for this information. And now we need to go on and see how we're going to implement it all.
Yeah. Tom, you at the end of my presentation, you basically encapsulated what I think we're trying to get at for interested parties of the public is how do approved name changes come through the Board of Libraries, ultimately make it to the map layers that are tied together with them. That's all we want to have. If it can be done in one bullet point, great. If it takes more than that, that's okay too. But just let us know what language you want to cook up for that.
Right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's go on to agenda number 5. I believe that's it. We're dealing with looking at all of our policies and procedures for geographic naming.
Great. I developed a PowerPoint that I think Jeanette is going to share her screen, and the PowerPoint's available on the Board of Libraries website currently. So if you wanted to have a copy of it for later, and just so people following along from home can kind of browse through it. So we put a PDF up. So as we've been talking about, the Board of Libraries is the statutorily designated body that names geographic locations, including mountains, streams, lakes, and ponds in our state. And after some discussion about naming at the April meeting of the Board of Libraries, our team at the Department of Libraries updated the Board of Libraries webpage to link directly to the legislation online. We also updated the board's webpage to include a link directly to the legislation. And we updated the board's webpage to include direct links to relevant geographic naming documents. Jeanette is asking me if I can see it, and I can see the presentation. Can everybody else see it right now?
Yes.
I'm seeing some heads nodding. Great. So folks on our Board of Libraries likely know that April Shaw had been serving as our geographic naming helper in the Department of Libraries to assist the Board of Libraries. And April has been training me and training Jesse Dahl, our executive assistant for the department, in sort of the behind the scenes work that goes on to keep things moving along. And we've had the chance to discuss some of the frequently asked questions and topics that our team communicates to members of the public, and some of the topics that the Board of Libraries and the department have discussed in the recent past, areas that had been discussed for clarification. And I was in touch with Tom Frank a few weeks ago to confirm the various points that the board might wish to clarify by revising its existing geographic names policies document. So I drafted some recommendations to the board, and you've received a copy of that in anticipation of this meeting, and the red line document is also posted on the Board of Libraries webpage. Any changes on that document are noted in red. Anything that is recommended that we delete is struck through. So to make it a little bit easier for everyone, what I did is I created this PowerPoint that I'd like to use to walk the board through each of the proposed changes. And for those of you who can see the PowerPoint, this next information is just a little bit of description of the PowerPoint. I found a template that had a lot of images of geographic features like mountains and blue skies and trees, and it seemed to fit well with our geographic names theme. And the theme colors for the PowerPoint are blues and greens. And what I've done is I've put the text of the recommended revisions on slides of the PowerPoint on a white background with existing language in black and edits in red text, just like the document, the PDF document. So I've put the recommended revisions in order as well. So I'm hopeful that people can follow along with the version that they're able to use most easily, either the PDF version or looking at the screen here. And then just to kind of help people stay on track with the PowerPoint following from home, I'll say next slide and Jeanette will move to the next slide. I see that there's a hand raised before we keep going. Linda, did you have a question?
No, sorry, I just left my hand up. I apologize.
Okay, great. So this is a little bit lengthy, so I beg your forgiveness, but I'm hoping that it's for the benefit of the future. And the thing to remember is that the board doesn't have to accept every recommendation or even any recommendations. These are just some starting points for us in conversation. I'm a member of the board, but I don't vote. And I promise I won't be insulted if you have revisions that you'd like to recommend, or if you say, no, we don't want to add that at all, or we don't think that this is necessary. You have a lot of experience and I value your input and your decisions, but this was just to get the conversation going for our group. Next slide, Jeanette. So moving to slide 2. So just to frame this for anybody who's looking at it online later on, just this slide restates that the Vermont Board of Libraries is the statutorily designated body to name geographic locations, including mountains, streams, lakes, and ponds. Next slide. What we're trying to do in the Department of Libraries is to have one document for everyone, for people from the board, for the Department of Library staff who helps with some of the back of house procedures. Since I'm the secretary of the board, our team helps to move things along, and for the public. And to have one source that everyone can rely on for information about the geographic naming process in Vermont. And so that's why I'm bringing these recommendations today for discussion. We also want to clarify the roles of the petitioner, the person who's requesting the change of a name or a new name, the Board of Library staff, to clarify that we act at the request and on the behalf of the board, but we are not the authority here. I am not the person as the state librarian who makes a decision about a name, to really make sure everybody understands that the Board of Libraries is the designated authority, and to clarify some of the roles. So we're moving from slide 3 to slide 4. And we're beginning with the recommended changes. So this is a revision. I'm recommending that we revise the name of this document, changing it from policies to procedures. As I'm sharing that information, you might wonder, well, why would we do that? And it's because this is really a guidance document. It serves like I shared, it serves for the board, but it's very procedural. A lot of the things that we have written down in our team need to be incorporated into this. And it's customary for a public facing document like this to be known as a procedure. And as a procedure, it would need to still be something that the board adopts. And then the department would be responsible for compiling and indexing and posting the procedure online. We actually need to go back in time, locate the original policies document from, it's from 1991, post the current version that we're working on, and then any future we need to post as well. So I clarified with our legal counsel that procedures is probably the best word, and it aligns it most with this type of document from other boards in the state. Next slide. Okay. One thing that really becomes clear when you look at the statute is that the thing that kicks everything off is the petition. Vermont is different from other states. Vermont is different from the federal government. The federal government doesn't actually put too much weight in the petition. But in Vermont, our statute is very clear that our work on the Board of Libraries begins if we receive a petition to name geographic locations, including mountains, streams, lakes, and ponds, as signed by not less than 25 interested persons, or by the petition of an administrative department of the state. That's what triggers us to consider something, and that is unique in our state, and that's what's called out in the legislation. So I'm recommending that we add that language that I just read to our procedure document to make it really clear that that is what starts, that's what initiates this process. The petition signed by 25 interested persons or by an administrative department of state. Next slide. Oh, and just a note, the specific statutes are down at the bottom in green. And we can put all of those statutes, the links to those they're all available online right now through the Board of Libraries website, but we can put the specific links in the minutes too. Roman numeral 1, we can just gloss over this because we're not recommending any changes to that. It's really clear about how the board does its work. In choosing names, that it gives preference to historical events, historic persons, and flora and fauna native to Vermont, names characteristic to Vermont and its traditions, and local place names where long usage has made them appropriate and useful. So that is directly from the statute. It's in the current document, and it should stay there, is my recommendation. Moving to slide 7, the petitioner's role. So as I was just sharing, it's really important that it's clear that the petitioner is the one who's requesting that something be named, that they're the one who has the desire to have a name change or to have a feature named that hasn't previously been named. And so I recommend the addition of number 2, Roman numeral 2. The petitioner must provide written documentation to support their request for geographic naming consistent with the standards articulated in the statute, and I call out the statute. In addition to historical research, the information provided by the petitioner must contain a description of the exact location of the feature to be named, the global positioning system coordinates of the geographic feature, and a map with the geographic feature clearly labeled, photocopies acceptable. Petitioners may be referred to the Vermont Historical Society and or local historical societies and or Visara for research assistance. This is a practice currently, and our hope is that we would just daylight the practice and add this instruction so that somebody who's coming to this document would know what to expect of the process.
Kathy, do you want commentary as we go along, or do you want to just go through all these and then talk?
How about I go through them all and then we can flip back to them for commentary?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I'm thinking it's probably easiest to get through them all and then we can go back and have the discussion at that point. Okay, the next slide is slide number 8. And I just want to call out the numbers have changed for 3 through 5, but there are no changes to the text of those. Those are existing things. So just because we added number 2, just re-Roman numeraled the bullets. So this one, the next recommended change is to Roman numeral 6, which pertains to petitions that we received from an administrative department of state government. And there's been some confusion, it sounds like, in the past where it's not clear, does the commissioner know or does the head of this department know that this has happened? Maybe somebody has, or that this, but we just want to make sure that the authority, the signing authority in the department, either the agency secretary or department commissioner, is aware and supports this naming request. So our team recommends that we add naming requests initiated by an administrative department of state government must be signed by the agency secretary or department commissioner to Roman numeral 6. The next slide, slide 9, there's a note that that I recommend be removed from the current policies document. So I'll just read, number 7, which is the board has the authority to determine whether it will take any action on a petition when no one appears at the public hearing to testify either on behalf of or against the proposed naming. We recommend that stays exactly the same, but that the next sentence, which is currently in the policies, be removed, because there's a parenthetical note that says this was a telephone opinion by Louis Peck, Assistant Attorney General, April 28th, 1978. That note isn't really appropriate to this type of procedure document. It's also the case that it's not a formal opinion. It wasn't written by the Attorney General's office. It's an informal telephone counsel, so our recommendation is to pull that note out of our document going forward. People would still be able to look back through the indexed documents and see that note if they wanted to look at the prior documents. Next slide is slide 10. We noticed when reviewing the federal naming procedures documents that they really nicely explain how to submit a petition. And so we recommend that we add Roman numeral 8, all petitions and associated documentation shall be submitted in written form to, and then the address of the State of Vermont Board of Libraries, care of Vermont Department of Libraries, attention geographic naming, 60 Washington Street, Suite Suite 2, Barre, Vermont, and then the zip code. This is a suggestion of how you could receive these. At the federal level, they also receive them by email. The board is welcome to receive them by snail mail, email, any way you want. Traditionally, my understanding is that they have been in written form because the petition is signed. So that is consistent, keeping them in written form rather than a verbal, I'd like to change the name. Moving on to slide 11, and I think it's Roman numeral 9. We had some notes in our files here in the Department of Libraries about things that the state librarian would do. Like if the state librarian didn't think there was enough information, that they would ask people to clarify it. And my sense is that it's really important to clarify that the board is who is requesting additional information. That you all, with the authority that you have to name geographic features, you may be requesting the additional information, and that petitioners would understand from having this bullet or this Roman numeral 9. Upon review of the material submitted by the petitioner, the board may request additional information and or documentation to support the geographic naming application, so that people know that this is a dialogue, that it could go back and forth, that there could be continued engagement, that it's not a one and done, people submit and that's the end of the process. And that's consistent with the practice of the board over the years. So really what we're trying to do is true up the document to match what the board has been doing and how the department has been supporting you in that work. The next slide is slide 12. This is really one that's intended to clarify the role of the Department of Libraries, that the board may request assistance from the Department of Libraries in verifying documentation submitted by the petitioner. Our team in the Board of Libraries isn't the primary research team. The responsibility for doing the research is with the petitioner, and the Department of Libraries, at the request of the board, can help with verifying documentation, but we're not the ones responsible for making the case to change the name. Slide 13 is the next one. And again, this is, we're looking at number 11, Roman numeral 11. And this is an addition recommended to align with the practice of the board and the department, and to ensure that petitioners remain engaged as their petition moves through the process. And the recommended addition is, if the board requests more information to support the petition be provided by the petitioner shall provide the information within 90 days to keep the petition active. If no response to additional requests of information is received, a final 30-day notice to respond will be sent. If no response is given, the Board of Libraries may suspend the petition pending further review or vote to close the petition with the requirement that the petitioner resubmit a new petition. And that's because really the petition has gone stale. This has been the practice, but again, trying to align this. I do want to call out that this timeliness isn't specifically mentioned in the statute, but is within the discretion of the board. The Board of Libraries can say, no, we don't want this at all. You could say we want to give 120 days to respond plus a 60-day final notice. These numbers are at your discretion. But the general idea is that these time limits on response help to make sure that the docket has only active petitions in it, and that the signatures, which are really important to the process, not be stale. Moving to slide 14. This is looking at warned public meetings, and it's really just stating the existing practice. So this is, it's not only slide 14, magically it's aligned with bullet point 14, with Roman numeral 14. So the board will consider naming requests at a warned public meeting. Prior to the meeting, written public warnings of the meeting will be issued from the Vermont Department of Libraries to the town clerk or select board where the feature is located and to local media. The United States Geological Survey and the United States Board on Geographic Names will also be notified and invited to attend. The board will send the petitioner a letter with the date and location of the public hearing via email or US mail. And that corresponds with what we do now. But again, just daylighting the process for people. Number 15 is really just providing the existing practice of making time and space for public comment on geographic petitions at the warned meeting. So Roman numeral 15 states the chair of the Board of Libraries will conduct the public meeting on geographic naming petitions during meetings of the Board of Libraries and will allow for comment from all interested persons on this agenda item. And then there's a bullet point. Citizens in attendance who wish to provide comment on a geographic naming petition must provide their full name and municipality in which they reside. And a second bullet, citizen comment will be scheduled as a separate agenda item and will be closed by the chair. I do want to call out on this one that the practice has been that citizens do need to provide their full name and the municipality in which they reside, and that is at the discretion of the board. That's not required for providing public comment. But it's completely within your purview to make that decision. And that's, I understand that's what you've been doing, which is appropriate. Slide 16. So this one pertains to follow-up questions from the board to the petitioners or people who have commented and then voting by the board. And the recommended addition is that the board will follow comment with discussion among the board members and may ask for additional comment or may have questions for persons who represent the petition or provided comment. Unless the board requires additional information to decide, the board will vote on the naming petition directly following public testimony. The board may choose for any reason to postpone a vote on a naming petition to an upcoming regular or special meeting. The next slide is slide 17. And I think there's an error on this slide, which I didn't catch. The name of the slide here should be issue announcement. But the recommended addition is Roman numeral 17. The state librarian will issue an order announcing the naming decision. We'll post the order on the Department of Libraries website and we'll send the order to the entities listed below. And then on the PDF document, there is a long list of all of the entities, and it includes the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. It didn't all fit on the slide. It also includes United States Geological Survey, Vermont Representative, United States Board on Geographic Names, various folks in the Transportation Agency, and others within the state. And a little bit strangely, the Green Mountain Hiking Club, we've been notifying them. This is our existing list. I believe that they do some of the maps of hiking in Vermont. Next slide. So slide 17 really covers everything that is in the redlined document, that PDF, the Word document PDF. But I wanted to share with you some additional things that you may wish to look at before making decisions or making revisions. The U.S. Board on Geographic Names, or USBGN, has some documents that I think would be very helpful to you if you haven't seen them. And I've listed both of those in the PowerPoint. The first is a document for the public that's titled How Do I? And it provides answers from USBGN staff to frequently asked questions by the public. The second document is titled Principles, Policies, and Procedures, Domestic Geographic Names. It's 84 pages long. It's not light reading. I've been making my way through it. And this is the version 2.2 that was published in December 2016. And the intended audience for that document includes states and local governments, Indian tribes, and federal agencies. And it's really intended for folks who at the state and local level work with the standards. Next slide, just a few more here, folks. Appreciate your patience. One topic that I understand has been of some discussion has been that of local support. I do just want to call everybody's attention to the USBGN policies procedures document. Page 28 has some language that might be helpful to consider. It says that the proponent of a new name or name change is encouraged to provide evidence of support for the proposal, as well as evidence of any published or verbal usage of the proposed names. Such evidence may include copies of maps, government records, or any documents and publications. It goes on to say that letters or emails supporting the proposal may be solicited from federal, state, or local, county, or municipal agencies, Indian tribes, state or tribal geographic names authorities, civic organizations, historical societies, owners of the property on which the geographic feature is located, and or others familiar with the geographic feature and the appropriateness of the proposal. You may wish to consider incorporating mention of this local support or even using this type of language or a revision of it. Including suggestion that letters from groups or organizations can be submitted. You may wish to add that to the procedure document. The next slide, slide 20. This one is another topic for you to consider, which is soliciting input. The USBGN guidance on the topic is that as an SNA is the state naming authority, that state naming authorities are encouraged to solicit input from the federal, state, and local land management agencies, as well as Indian tribes before issuing their recommendations to BGN. One thing that's important to mention with tribal notification is that USBGN will notify federally recognized tribes. However, in Vermont, we do not have any federally recognized Native American tribes, to my knowledge. We have state recognized tribes, and they would not be noticed by USBGN. It's also possible that the board would benefit by calling out that we're following the naming conventions, and Tim said something about this earlier, both the state and federal naming conventions. A good example of this is you might look at Camel's Hump and wonder where the apostrophe went, but there are no apostrophes in the names. So, it's helpful that our group, that the Board of Libraries names in such a way that it will then be accepted further up the line with the federal naming authorities. And that is the end of my very lengthy PowerPoint. And now is the opportunity to discuss, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you'd like, we can leave the slides up and go back to the relevant one so people can read it. It's up to you. I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
And I would, yeah, and okay, thank you very much, Kathy. I was going to say this is going to be a fairly lengthy process, so I'm thinking we might want to schedule another meeting or have a group. And what do we have to call it? We're not going to create any subcommittees where.
Yeah, I think you would need
like
a group of 3 or fewer people.
Yeah, to also look at this, because we're not going to be able to do it all today, that's for sure. So we can have a special meeting where we, after we get to look at it, discuss a few things today, and then just have a special group of 3 or fewer people of the board to go over each of the points and make recommending either at the special meeting or at our next meeting in October. Okay, hand raised. Hands raised.
This is Deb.
Okay, Deb.
Before we get into any of the details of the particular slides and the new language and all, I have a general question. Is this whole process subject to the Administrative Procedure Act? Because we're doing rulemaking, and rulemaking is governed by the Administrative Procedure Act, and so do we have to follow that before we can actually make these changes?
Is that why we call them practices and not procedures?
I just I'm not sure I can answer your question directly, Deb, not being an attorney, but I do know that the process of revising, naming them procedures and bringing them to you all for review, that process has been vetted and that I've sought legal counsel related to it. But if there's a specific question that you think we should look into, I've written down the question of, is this covered by the Administrative Procedures Act?
So the basically the Secretary of State's office is kind of responsible for the Administrative Procedure Act. So they've signed off on this, that it doesn't need to go through rulemaking.
We have the authority. My understanding is that the Board of Libraries has the authority to create the procedures, to amend the existing policies and procedures, and that it is not something that needs to go to the Secretary of State. That is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Any other general comments before we start back at the beginning? Because we still have Kathy's update and we need to talk about board members. Okay. Another hands raised. Yes, Maxie.
I think your idea is great, Tom, to have a subgroup of 2 or 3 people to look at the details of the procedures. So I'm a little bit confused about, we have the statute. So do we have a policy and then the procedures? Or do we don't have a policy anymore? And just procedures? Or
That second one, Maxie. So the document, the statutes continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then this document, as much or as little of it as the board decide to revise, would be in place of the current policies document. It would be an updated version really of that. Just as it was updated in 2015, and it kind of takes the place of the 1991.
I think it's going to be a big job. I've been on the Board of Psychological Examiners for 10 years, and at the end of every meeting, we discussed addition to or changes to procedures. So just a comment. Okay.
Yeah, because okay, so at this point then, there really a big discussion about any specific point that you want, but what do you think, Kathy and the others? We could get volunteers. I can say up to three individuals, because any more than that is the board meeting to simply go over all of these and then look at it, study it, and then we could have a special meeting, or, as I said, at our October meeting, approve them.
Hey, Tom, before we do that, Lynn Shea, I'm sorry if I don't have your name right, has a comment or has a question, I think.
Oh.
The member of the public.
Please, Lynn, we want the public to chime in here.
Great, thank you. Very helpful presentation, both of them. So I guess my interest in this discussion is, as I said before, we've spent over a year, the whole process of trying to rename Negro Brook has extended into 2 years. And because this has been framed as changing the procedures as guidance to the public or potential petitioners, I'm wondering if the board would consider, continuing to accept petitions rather than waiting for these procedures and to be finalized, because I see this extending out for a considerable period of time, as Ms. Ewens just indicated. And I think that I certainly, as a member of the public, appreciate the changes and potential changes, and understood pretty much, some of the flaws in the past petition for changing this particular geographic location. And because this is essentially using the feedback of the board to reframe a petition and get local support and follow the procedures that you have outlined, I guess I would like to informally request whether you would be willing to consider this petition, given the number of people that have been engaged with this over the last 2 years.
Yeah, have we received, Kathy, have we received a new petition? If we receive a petition, we must address it, whether existing policies or whatever we're doing. But that's what triggers it, the petition.
So a couple of clarifying points. I believe that a new petition has been received.
Okay.
Related to a request to rename Negro Brook. I also know that there is not any requirement of a certain amount of time, and there is actually an expectation that a petition will take some time. So for example, the USBGN document says that a petitioning process takes at least 6 months. This particular petition came in before I was the state librarian, and I don't know exactly when it arrived. My preference in the State Department of Libraries is that we have a clear process that our team can follow, so that we know that we are doing it the right way, the way that the board wants us to. We've moved things that we were doing behind the scenes forward into this public-facing document. And my recommendation would be that the board decide on the process that we are all to follow, so that we can communicate clearly to the public. And I recognize there are a couple of petitions out there that we would need to do some recommunicating with. But I think in the long run, some of the concerns that had been coming up in the past are what we're trying to resolve, so that we have a really clear process and a really clear framework that we can feel good about when we make decisions. When you make decisions. I'm on the board, but I'm not a voting member. But from the administrative point of view, I would really appreciate that the board determine what the steps were, and that it was very clear and very transparent, so that we could communicate that to the public, and my team stood a chance of doing it the way that you would like us to do it.
Right. I was just going to bring up one thing. Absolutely the first point when it said 25 petitioners, we had asked, well, where are the petitioners from? Actually, the statute does not say, does it not? And that would determine by the other positions that were taking input from historical entities, whatever, and local from the federal guidance. So that's why I think looking at the whole thing is important. Have to look at the whole body. And I'm sorry, who was speaking? I'm sorry.
I had a comment. I think, Kathy, you're absolutely right that we need to get our procedures codified. Although you did note that we are within our rights to ask any of these questions, ask for any of this information. We just didn't have it written down as something that we might be requiring of petitioners. I think it's absolutely important that we get all this written down so that petitioners know. Ms. Shea is right, however, that this is going to take a while. And and so the question of what we do with petitions in the meantime, and maybe we could, I don't know what we do with petitions in the meantime. I wonder if we circulate your document as draft, or you in the Department of Libraries, when you get a petition, you say to them, in recent past, the board has asked for X, Y, and Z. You might be aware of that, even though it's not as part of our official procedures, but you should provide that or be aware that you might be asked for that. I mean, I sympathize with Ms. Shea, that she's sort of caught in another world here, and it's important that we move forward on these petitions.
The bad news is that I was just going to say the bad news is that you're caught up in it, and the good news, you're going to make the Board of Libraries and our procedures much better because of it. I'm sorry, and then yeah.
This is Kathy speaking. One suggestion would be that in order to be responsive to the public and to the petitions that are out there already, that a working group be given a certain amount of time, and that we could call a special meeting of the Board of Libraries as early as next month to consider and vote on changes, so that there would be a delay, but not as significant of a delay. I think, Linda, for me, there's, the things that have been the practice, the people doing the practice right now are all new people. And it's difficult to say, oh, well, this pre-pandemic, there was so-and-so, and then April carried it and did April's very best, and April did good work, but now Jesse and Kathy will be doing it. And you start playing telephone. I want to go back to the original caller and get the official word before Jesse and I, even with our best attempts and our best service we're trying to provide to the public, I really want to be sure that we are doing the steps that make sense, the steps that have been vetted. There are some things that were in the bigger document that I did not bring to you today, because they might not be the appropriate things to do. And in my decision, after speaking with others in the field and with council, was really to not bring forward every single part. The things that I've brought forward as recommendations are on solid footing.
So would it be available to do a special meeting like the second Tuesday in August? This is not a hearing, so therefore you only need have to post it 48 hours in advance, and then set up a study group or working group or whatever of two or three individuals to work on this, and then have a special meeting to go over just this. Need everybody's opinion. How would that work?
That day is free on my calendar, Tom.
I'm not sure.
I see Adrian nodding.
Okay, Adrian's nodding.
It works for the discussion amongst the whole board. So it's not just the working group per se and the opinions, but it also will be brought to the larger group for further clarification and discussion.
Right.
Yeah. And the working group could be by email or by in person?
Yes.
Both, or would it be fine? Okay.
Yeah, just can't exceed the 3 people. That's all.
This is Deb, and I'm not 100% sure if that week is going to be good for me, but I'm just one person, so I mean.
Yeah, same for me. I don't know if I'm going to be here or not.
Well, look, why don't we make it tentative right now, and then everybody check their calendars and see, and then email either me or Kathy, probably Kathy better, because Kathy's scheduled as well. And I'm just saying, because we usually meet the second Tuesday of the month, and that's why I picked that. And if you can't meet that, just give another date in mid-August there that we could.
The next week after that, hold on, so we're talking about the 9th of August is the second Tuesday in August.
Okay.
The 16th of August is Bennington Battle Day, so that would not be a good day.
That's a
since
state
it's
holiday,
a state
right?
holiday. The 23rd of August is another potential date. So what we'll do is Jesse will send out an inquiry about the 9th, Tuesday, the 9th of August and Tuesday, the 23rd of August.
Yeah,
And
I think the
please
9th
give
is
your
probably a little bit
availability for
early,
both.
so the 23rd would be good. Okay. So everybody can just talk about that, either the 9th or the 23rd. I would say the 23rd is better because it gives a little bit more time for the study group to work. Okay, any objections? We'll go with that right now.
This is Deb. I just have, I would just feel comfortable, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind running by the Secretary of State that we're not that this rulemaking is not subject to the Administrative Procedures Act.
Okay.
I mean, unless you don't want to open up a can of worms, I don't know, but it seems to me like we're interpreting how a statute should be looked at, and that to me seems like the perfect example of
Well, in the
go ahead.
last two instances, I don't know if anyone on the board currently was there on July 14th, 2015, but in the last two instances when this document was revised, was it subject to that?
No, we I don't think so.
Yeah, so, I mean, our department has counsel and
Okay, all right.
I will check with them to be absolutely positive, but my understanding so far is from prior conversations, no, that this would just be within the authority of the board.
And maybe it's because we're a board, not an agency, and the Administrative Procedure Act applies to an agency. So maybe if the Department of Libraries was making these policies or procedures, then it would be subject. But maybe since we're a board, we're not subject to it. So maybe, so that's, I'd just like to know that, that's all.
Deb, you know what would be really helpful? You are so much more knowledgeable about the law than I am. Will you send me the question as an email and I will be sure to get it exactly answered? Because I want to be comfortable. I want all of you to be comfortable with what we're doing and make sure that we're doing it in the appropriate way. I think if you notice anything about me, we've met twice now, and I like to be sure that we're doing things in the appropriate and proper way for complying with existing legislation and expectations of bodies like ours. Thank you.
I think Tom might be on mute or something.
Yes, I hit the mute on my headset, so you didn't hear me asking Echo what time it was, right? Yeah, we're at 11:55 now, so and we're scheduled for the 2 hours. And Kathy gave a report on the state. Also, the state newsletter came out yesterday or today.
I think that the next item on the agenda was actually the voting on the representative to Vermont Public Library Foundation.
Right, that's which we have to do. Okay, so let's
sorry to interrupt. Go
to that. We need a representative from the Vermont Board of Libraries to the Do
you want me to
group? Yes.
I have a little very brief intro just to set it up for folks. So as many of you are aware, as the state librarian, I serve as the president of the Vermont Public Library Foundation. We refer to it as VPLF for short. I really want to stress that while the state statute allows for the state librarian to have formed VPLF, VPLF is separate and distinct from the Vermont Department of Libraries. At the April 2022 meeting, I mentioned that I had been reviewing the articles of incorporation and trying to clarify membership of VPLF. In doing that, I noticed that the articles of incorporation posted on the Department of Libraries webpage were incomplete and that the PDF up there was only the first page of those articles. We located the second page of the articles of incorporation, which were signed in August 2000. And per those articles, which are on file with the Secretary of State, the VPLF actually has 6 directors. The president is the state librarian. The articles call out that the Director of Public Library Support Services of the Vermont Department of Libraries is a member of the Board of Directors. That position doesn't quite exist, but Jeanette Schaefer's Assistant State Librarian for Advancement is the most closely aligned with that position. So Jeanette would also be a director. A member of the steering committee of the Vermont Library Trustees section of the Vermont Library Association or its designee is the third member. The president of the public library section of the Vermont Library Association or their designee is a member. And then finally, one member of the Vermont State Board of Libraries who must be elected by the Board of Libraries. So I'd like your help in electing one of your Board of Libraries members to serve on the board of VPLF. And I'd make a recommendation that this person be someone who has at least a year left in their term on the Board of Libraries so that the person who's elected can serve for the entire fiscal year of 2023.
So the term is a year?
The term is as long as you all don't elect somebody else. It's not called out that the term of that is 1 year. So if you wanted to elect somebody and just leave them in place, you are certainly welcome to do that, or you could decide to re-elect every year or however frequently you wish.
And that goes for the other roles as well, like the Vermont Library Association. You mentioned 2 roles at least, the public library, and that's not on the website for VLA, I don't think, being someone who was the trustee representative.
No, and part of what's confusing is that it seems that the practice of adhering to who is on the board has been a little bit different in the past. So that was why I wanted to find the articles and stick with what's here. My sense is that those VLA roles would rotate on an annual basis as new people came in.
Yes, traditionally it's you serve as vice president, then president, and then past president. And it's technically the friends and trustees now, that role at VLA. There's not anyone in that position currently. I was the last and tried to find a replacement without success, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, the public library is a larger group and that won't be as much of a issue, but
so what do we, okay, so Deb and Bruce are going off. Let's hope, and I lied, Maxie, because that's one thing we're doing, pressing. We have to find new board members. And because Bruce and Deb been on a long time, and as much as we love them and on all the work they've done, we really do need to find 2 more people. So 1 member of the board, so that's only 5 out of 5. We need 1.
And also, how much is the commitment of time? It's like, when is this group meeting? I mean, like, how can someone agree to something without like a clarification of the role or job description? Or I think this almost needs to be wait.
Well,
we have a special meeting coming up. It could be for there too.
It could be for there. In order to get all of the documents that need to be updated with the Secretary of State, it would be very helpful for VPLF to vote either now or in August. The time commitment in the past has been very minimal, as little as one meeting a year. I think that there are some things that probably need to be taken care of with this board, that there might be monthly meetings for a few months, because it's been inactive for some time.
For 5
So
years,
what I'm
right,
trying
or
to do
something
is
along
to
that.
have it be active so that we can access the funds and grant them out.
I have an in-between question. How much money is in that pot now? Do you know?
I do not currently have access to the bank account, Maxie. So part of me getting that access is by having the 3 members of the board of directors, at least, so that we can file the paperwork.
Well, Adrian, would you be interested in doing that?
I would be. I would like to hear, yeah, like about when things are and see if it's possible. But yes, I would be interested.
Okay, so you want to move that Adrian be appointed from the board as the representative?
Thank you, Adrian. I move that Adrian Katz be nominated for this position on the Vermont Public Library Foundation Board.
Okay,
A
is there a
second.
second?
A second.
Okay, say James seconds. Okay, any further discussion? Yeah, because Adrian will definitely be on for more than a year and give a new thing. And did you also hear what Kathy said? Find out how much money is and might just distribute the money, and so it may no longer exist. But that's up for the board to decide, and it's a separate entity from the library. It's not part of this board, and it's totally separate. Am I correct, Kathy?
Yeah, and toward that end, for whatever reason, there's been confusion about the connections between the Department of Libraries and this organization, to the extent that there's even a webpage on the state's site, on our Department of Libraries site for VPLF. I am sharing with you now in this open meeting that my plan is to remove that site, that page from our website, because it is not part of the Department of Libraries. And the VPLF will need a separate website if it chooses to have a website, hosted independently, not by the state server. It's a totally separate organization.
Yep, it's not a state entity, actually. It's a private.
No.
Yep. Okay, so we have Adrian Katz. Is there all in favor of appointing Adrian? Signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so Adrian, my condolences or congratulations, whichever.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
The 2 new board members, right now we're running over, and we're not supposed to be running over because it's a warned meeting. As Maxie is right, we absolutely have to search. And what were you saying, Maxie? Actually, the state librarian also looks. Everybody needs to look for new members.
I'm also
the administration.
Yeah, that I wanted to share. I've checked with my agency of administration contacts, and I understand that there is someone in the governor's office who works on appointments to boards, and I plan to connect with them in the coming weeks about this.
Okay, great.
Because my understanding is that they also have, the person will be appointed by the governor, so they have some folks that they might be able to recommend, and they may be wanting to appoint. But if anybody has ideas of folks who are interested in libraries and supporters of libraries, you can please share their names. I can take names to them as well, I believe. People who you think would be a good fit with the board and have an interest in the board's activities with libraries and the board's activities with geographic naming as well.
Okay, so at this time, okay, that's that, and I will talk with Kathy, and I'll talk to various board members and see who wants to be on the dealing with our policies and procedures, not policies, practices and procedures and practices. There we go. On that committee, and then Jesse will get out whether we're August the 9th or the 23rd for our special meeting to finalize these policies, or at least move them forward. Any other last minute? Just okay.
I'm sorry, asking questions. So I've read with great interest Kathy's report. It was great. I had a couple of questions. We talked about it. But will we look at Kathy's report at the special meeting, or do we just accept it as I don't know what
well, that's what the group will look at. Look at that report, you know, hash out, and then report back to the.
No, I'm talking about Kathy's state-of-the-art library report.
Her report on the library, state library. I'm sorry, I'm just don't know how we could do. You have a question about? Why don't you go ask a question if anybody wants to. You have a question on her report?
I thought it was great.
Okay.
My comment was, you are really busy, Kathy, and we talked, emailed. I had a couple of questions, and I think we resolved them. One of my questions was the congressional directed spending, but Kathy clarified that it's not going to happen till the year, what, 2025?
2023 likely.
325.
Likely, I think it would be that we wouldn't know if we actually received the congressionally directed spending that Senator Leahy's office put forward until the 2023 budget is finalized. Sometimes that can be as late as April 2023.
Right. And then
we would know if it doesn't make it through a certain phase. I'm sorry, Maxie.
No, that's okay. I think we talked about it, so
yeah,
I'm good.
Okay. Any other parting questions?
Well, the thoughts I had, I don't know if they're specific enough for being a board member versus being a public librarian, but I wanted to discuss the state passes. That there are two that are provided, the state parks pass and the state historic sites, and the things to make and to improve that program, to perhaps provide more promotional materials or booklets. You know, I'm operating with a book from like 2018 to be able to explain, and so that people know what's available to them. A list is helpful, but pictures or brochures or more information that could be useful. Also, that the two passes, like one held up the other, and if you know that if people are, the parks pass is very popular, and if the state historic sites is going to take longer, which is fine, maybe decoupling them, so we can get that circulating, because a lot of people come to the library to utilize the parks pass. And it would also be curious to know, I know those are state based and that's what the department manages, but it would be interesting to know about all the passes that are at different libraries and who has what and what they could get. For example, the Vermont Historical Society, we have that pass. It's a family, you can go in for free, but I don't know if all libraries know that they can access that pass as well in terms of public libraries. So like talking more about that, but again, it's maybe my perspective as a librarian versus a board member, but I do remember that being discussed in your report briefly. So thoughts to improve that.
Thank you for this feedback, Adrian. I encourage you to reach out directly to Jeanette if you have any. She's here right now, so she's heard your comments. But if you have any specific ideas, please feel free to reach out to her team.
But one reason we got you on the board, because you are a librarian and you're Northeast Kingdom with a private library, and bringing those concerns, if it is not only just a concern to you, it's concern probably to every other library as well. So no, that's why we think you're a good addition to this to the board. Okay, any other questions? Sorry to keep you people over, but we had a lot to do, and then we'll finalize that August meeting, and we'll do that, and I'll get in touch with Kathy and others of you and get that working group going. So we have something to work on a little bit more definitive at the special meeting in August.
Tom, can I just ask that we've sort of rushed discussion of Kathy's report here at the end, and I wonder if we could just have a small agenda item at that special meeting to review her report in case there were any other questions that people have.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we have the three. Okay. Anyway, okay. Thank you everybody for coming. And I'm sorry for the sort of the rushed atmosphere, but we had a lot to talk about. Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
I have motion to adjourn to second. It's a non-debatable motion. That's what Bruce always made me say that. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody wants to stay is free to stay as long as they want. There won't be anybody else there, but that's okay. Anyway, again, thank you, everybody, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.